Right, how's that? Excellent, we're off and running. Let's try again. So why IDF? So all the things on the screen there about being prudent, efficient, our stakeholders are involved, we're risk-based decision making, we've got gates that are holding us up and making good decisions, we're aligning to strategic directions. We have our priorities really clear and we're prioritising the work we're doing and when. We're making our decisions on whole of life cost. They're justified and we're looking at these investments from end to end or start to end. So that's kind of, and there's lots of words around that in the policy and the corporate standard about why, but they're really the key words that when I look at it is why we're doing the investment decision, and I'm sure there's a multitude of others that you can think of. So what is the investment decision framework? And I've heard lots of people talk about this as just being kind of like that process map or the diagram, the one picture thing, but it's a lot more. The framework is the series of the policy, being what council adopted, and they just adopted that on the 18th of May, the revised one, sorry. We have the what, which is the IDF corporate standards, so that's what encompasses all our business rules and processes. And then we have the guidelines, which we're capturing in the IDF business manual that we're in the final stages of that drafting and getting it sorted. And it captures all the things around procedures, templates, tools, and we're using the IDF connected space as the home for all of this to be that one-stop shop. So it's the whole package is the framework. So if you hear someone talking about that single process map as the framework, then it's just part of it. So how to apply the IDF? So fundamentally, to apply it, we're using a series of phases, which are the establish, identify, assess, and then we're using the series of gates to step us through. So across the top there. What makes this, or what made it seem like such a beast in the start with, is I guess in applying the IDF, there's a number of things that we're trying to establish or do or encompass. And I guess I'll just walk through, and that is the little bars that sit below. So the IDF is trying to make sure that we are making the right investments. So, and that's certainly the first part of the phases. And then we transition to, are we doing the investment right? So have we got our planning and project management? So at the same time, the first phases particularly are about trying to establish the prudency of the investment. So have we got the right business case? Does it stack up? And then we're ensuring efficiency of the spend in the later phases. So how we do that, we obviously manage the projects under the project management framework, and that happens from the select through to the close phases. We have capital portfolio management, which is the project Tanya Brown's been leading, and certainly will transition a lot of that work into the works planning and scheduling space about how we manage particularly that 3-year portfolio. And then we have manage our operations and maintenance. So all these investments, particularly in the capital space, we've then got to operate and maintain them. So we have a maintenance management framework which we're establishing of how we actually do that. And that really starts from the execute phase. So as we're building these things, we're working out how we're going to bring them online and what maintenance, what activities do we have to do. And certainly right down the bottom is the technical component. I guess up front we're considering what that investment opportunity is and the options. We're investigating the specifications through that select and define phase, and then of course we're delivering it through the execute and close. So I guess the takeaway from me is there's lots of stuff that this IDF is trying to do, as we know, but it's about breaking it down and making it really practical so that we can actually do it and we have discipline when we do it.
Can I ask a question? I assume it comes into, are we making the right investment and the prudency?
Yep.
Are we making the right investment at the right time?
Yes.
Does that come into, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it might be a good investment, but not now?
Yep.
Yeah,
Correct.
Cool.
Yep. And that comes back to the need and prioritising as well.
Yeah.
So what's the end goal, or why does this matter that we have to get this right? So here at council we have a number of different, I guess, views of where these projects or investment feed into. So we have a 10-year plan, which is what sits in Tech 1 in that IPP, and it's that long-term capital plan. We then have, and this is what we're developing at the moment, is the 3-year view, which is the capital portfolio. And then we have, which is basically just a subset of that 10 years. It's just any projects that start in the first 3. We then obviously every year adopt a budget, and that budget that we adopt is, I call it a 1+2. We have a really detailed program of what that first year looks like, and that just drops out of the capital portfolio. The council also do adopt that year 2 and 3 as well. In the past, that we haven't had a lot of rigour around to know exactly what those projects are. It's kind of just been a dollar number. As we get more mature with that capital portfolio, it'll enable us to adopt a much better year 2 and 3 budget in that.
Well, there may be some work in that year 1 that actually gets implemented in year 3.
Yep.
So we still have to be a part of it.
Yeah, so you might do design is in for year 1 and then we're constructing over 2 and 3. So we're forecasting that, and that's what sits in that portfolio. So. And then obviously we have individual capital investments, and this is where we're really starting with the IDF is progressing those individual ones through. So that picture there, we've talked about it for a long time, and I think it was good for me certainly to bring it all together. How is this whole picture coming together? Righto, so let's implement IDF. That's where we're at right now. The often running point is from 1st of July. The intent is that all capital investments are to progress through IDF from their current phase. So everything in IPP at the moment, we are matching it to the phase it's currently in. So everything isn't going right back to the start. We will just consider that they have done everything up to that phase. We do know there's gaps in that assumption, and we're putting other steps in place like data cleansing and that sort of stuff to try and fix that up, particularly of those legacy projects that exist in IPP. And that'll be a work in progress, and something is certainly a project in the first half of or from 1st of July. So for capital, for operational investments, there's a project commencing in the 21-22 financial year, which is specific looking at how we align operational investments to IDF. So, and it's more about doing basically the same exercise we're now doing, that implementation for the operational, and there's a few more mechanics in that. Okay, so why are you here? You are all part of the decision-making roles, or have decision-making roles in the IDF and in this process. So it could be that you have to appoint a sponsor. It could be that you are a sponsor in some of these projects or investments. You may be appointing a sponsor's rep to act on your behalf if you're the sponsor. Or you could be a line manager, and a line manager has a few different jobs, particularly in the upfront gate 0. But obviously you have your normal duties, watching the work or managing the work through the phases as well. So the biggest thing is that you definitely are supported. This implementation, and I'm quite proud of it, is that the resources have definitely been thrown into making sure that we implement properly and we manage the change. The big part of it is having a central location. So the IDF connected page will be the source, and not everything is there right at this minute, but we're building it and getting everything in there over the next 3 weeks. And it'll continue to grow as this thing grows and we learn from it as well. So please go to the connected page if you're lost or stuck, and there's also other avenues of support for you as well. So I did have another video, but my track record of videos running properly is not working. So I might just skip over it. But if I can ask you to go onto the connected page and have a look at them. The second video on that connected page is an overview and a run through of what the actual IDF is, and steps you through that overarching principles of the phases and gates. But we'll get that as we go through the next slides anyway. So I'm going to start with the investment categories because they're quite fundamental to understand, because all our delegations and roles and responsibilities basically hangs off of what type of investment we're dealing with. So we have 4 categories of investments. We have standard. Standard is probably 70% roughly of what we do in this business. So it is the majority. It's stuff that we deliver often, and it's stuff that really is part of our core of what we do. Typically, it's got that low complexity that comes with it as well. Examples, and there's lots of examples where we do, there's a picture there of just a bridge we installed at the Tundoon Botanical Gardens. We do culvert replacements, we do, you know, water main upgrades that are straightforward. So they're the types of things. Advanced is kind of that next category up, so in complexity, it's a little bit more complex. It might be stuff that we don't often deliver at council, but it is industry practice that, you know, people do this stuff all the time. So an example, and that picture up there is of the new cell 3A at the Banarabi landfill. It could be a new water reservoir, it could be you know, Gundoon Street footpath that we're upgrading at the moment. That's got a high level of stakeholder and complexity to it. So yeah, those types of things. And really, as we step up in these, you'll see the thing, they're getting more complex, they need more rigor around them. And certainly it's the level of governance we're going to apply to each of these gets a higher level as we go up. So the third category is significant, and these are ones that we don't do, probably haven't done ever, or they have that really high complexity, they involve a lot of stakeholders, they're typically going to be big money type projects, but sometimes not always. They're things like the Phillip Street precinct that we're building at the moment, and that's the picture that's up there. They're also things that could be the Marley Brown or the coal exporters redevelopment project, and there's a few others, Harbour Armour and things like that. So then we have the fourth category, which is urgent. So urgent is very much stuff that is unplanned. It might have been risk assessed as needing immediate action, but still needs elements of design and stuff to solve it. This urgent category isn't for stuff that, like if a water main burst, we're not going to run it through IDF, we're just going to go and fix the water main. However, if there was something that come off the back that we've got multiple bursts that happen on that main and we need to escalate it through as an urgent item that hasn't been on our program previously, then that's the project that might come through as urgent. So again, it's probably the last 5% that we have. So we live in that standard world often, but we here at GRC have such a broad range of projects we deal with and investments we deal with. It's important that we kind of have those different pathways and ways of dealing with them appropriately. And obviously something simple and straightforward, we don't need to put a whole heap of rigor over them. Okay, so delegations is probably the core that sets the governance around this, and as particularly well, all the different roles. So I'm going to explain these delegations, then basically jump into a few examples of how they practically apply and what's the actual forms and templates you might expect to see. Okay, so the first, and there's 5 delegations that, and these are all new. These were created as part of doing the corporate standard. They sit in the administrative delegations register, but they are things that you need to be aware of what your responsibilities are, and they do tie back to those categories. So the first one is the power to decide if an investment proceeds through decision gate 0. So decision gate 0 is all about, do we want to spend any time on this? What's the vision? What's the backstory to it? And the delegate to make that decision is the line manager. So majority of cases, you know, it's someone coming up with an idea, coming to you, Thomas, and saying, hey, I've got this idea, can I spend some time on it? So at this stage, they haven't done problem statements or anything like that. It's just, I think we should do something with this. So the delegation is limited to the line manager's area of responsibility, and we're saying that it needs to be a level 3 leader or above. And I appreciate this, maybe I shouldn't share this, but I was putting together the training material yesterday and realised that we'd actually missed out this whole delegation around gate 0. So thank you to Vicky and Lisa, who we scrambled yesterday afternoon and fixed this up to make sure it did flow and we had it right. So a very good example of where we're tweaking things to make sure practically it works on the ground. So the second delegation is again power to decide if and when investments proceed through the IDF decision gate. So this is all gates and the delegate is the sponsor. So there may be examples where we've already got a sponsor identified and we know who that is at gate 0, but typically we won't. If I'm using an 80-20 rule, we won't know that. So hence we needed that line manager delegation. So, but this delegation is for all the decision gates. So there is a few limitations. It's subject to any conditions set by council. So council may resolve that a certain gates they want it to come back to them. So the sponsor isn't the decision maker in those instances. It's limited to the area they're appointed to. So if I'm sponsor on a project, I can't go and make decisions on Thomas's project that he's sponsor on. And for advanced and urgent items, they must obtain manager approval at final investment decision stage where a level 3 leader is appointed the sponsor. So this was just come off the back of knowing in some instances you may have a single sponsor or single person making every gate decision, so it's around for those higher risk or complexity to add in that higher level. Yeah. So this is something also we're monitoring over 12 months to make sure that this risk around these decisions are, we're not setting ourselves up to fail and things aren't just pushing through. So the next one is power to approve change requests under the project management framework. So this is particularly from the select phase onwards. If during the phase we have a change, it might be that they've uncovered in the design rock, or they've done geo and there's a whole heap of rocks, so the cost has exploded out. So these change requests need to come through during the phase to update the business case. The sponsor is the delegate to make the decisions, and again there's a subject to those conditions and limitations. We've had a lot of discussion around this of sometimes there's changes that get made in a project that they don't necessarily trigger this change request, or they're really little in nature, and it's the PM is able to deal with it, or as part of the design team as well. That's not what we're trying to capture here. We're trying to capture those changes that have an impact on that business case and that validity of the project. So this is one also that through consultation, it's one we're monitoring as well to see what the impact on workload is as well, of how this actually plays out. So the fourth delegation is power to appoint sponsors for significant investments. So we know the sponsor is the decision maker, and we now have to appoint a sponsor. The delegate is the CEO. So for any of those significant investments, the CEO will appoint the sponsor. So appointments must be documented, and we're using IPP to capture that documentation. The appointer may elect to require IOC review, which for significant investments, we've said it's not electing, it actually is required. The sponsor cannot be the same person as the proponent, and the proponent's so the person bringing the forms and the stuff to the gate. And the appointed delegate may nominate a sponsor representative and must document that. And we'll talk about the sponsor rep. The fifth delegation is around power to appoint sponsors for advanced, standard and urgent investments. So general managers are the delegate, and obviously the CEO can as well. And again, it's limited to the GM's business unit. Appointments can be down to level 3 leaders as sponsors. They must be documented, and for advanced, standard and urgent, they may elect for the IOC to be, or the investment opportunity committee to be part of that decision making at the gate, but it's not mandatory. So the sponsor cannot be the same person as the proponent, and you can have a sponsor's rep on your behalf. Righto, I apologise, I know that is dry and delegations are always dry, but is there any questions about them? Because these are the things that we come unstuck if we start acting outside of them.
My question isn't about the delegations as such, but when we were talking about IDF early on, it was about bringing the problem to the, is that still the case, or are we bringing a project?
No, we're absolutely bringing a problem.
We're bringing a problem, and it's not until gate 3 or something that it becomes a project.
So gate 2,
yeah,
and let's talk through that.
Yeah, cool.
I'll talk through that in later slides of how that actually transitions. Yeah. Okay, so I've now just got a series of slides. They are about each phase and gate, and I'm going to focus specifically on I guess, a bit of the, what are you practically going to see at each of these? So gate 0 is all about if I've got a problem, idea, opportunity, need, something's popped up. The proponent is the one that's going to be filling out an investment opportunities brief, so it's a template. It gets presented to line manager typically. The line manager makes the gate decision. Once the decision's made to proceed, if that's what it is, then it'll go to either the CEO or the GM based on the category of project and that delegation to get a sponsor appointed, and also document if the IOC is required. And it then also goes, to that sponsor they then have the opportunity to appoint a sponsor's rep. So the sponsor's rep is someone who acts on the behalf of the sponsor. They have all that, well, they can have all of the same delegations depending on what the sponsor specifies, with the big exception being they can't make the gate decision itself.
Yeah.
So they've got everything else, so they can, throughout phases, they can review and act and direct within the phase, but as soon as it comes to that gate decision, it escalates back up to the sponsor. And we have multiple situations where this is already happening in the business. So Ericsson is someone that is in the acts as that sponsor rep in this for significant projects. So Phillip Street as an example, where Carly's the sponsor, but Ericsson acts as sponsor's rep for that day-to-day type stuff where the sponsor needs to be involved, or not necessarily day-to-day, sorry, but reporting and that type of stuff. Okay, so we then move into identifying gate 1, and this is where it's all about the problem or opportunity statement. So it's fleshing out what is that problem or opportunity and why should we really be addressing it. This is where the proponent would fill out, would start the business case template, but all they're doing in here is the problem statement, and there's a series of fields to flesh that out. Once that's done, they would then go to the IOC if they're triggered for review, and then the sponsor fills in, and then it goes to the sponsor. So for this gate, so for gate 1 through to 6, there is a checklist that you will have, and there's a series of questions on that checklist that help you work through whether this is something we should proceed past gate 1. The idea is this checklist becomes the document, and I'll talk later about the mechanics, but it's the document that we're putting our approval on as IOC or recommendation for IOC and then sponsor approval. So assess. So we've got our problem statement, we've got our approval on our problem statement, and we've moved into assess. The proponent is then filling out the business case template. So we're now completing the rest of the attributes or fields that exist in a business case. Once they've done that, it gets presented again to very similar, the IOC and sponsor, what's required. And they've then got a gate 2 checklist that they're filling out, and the approval or the decision gets recorded on that form. So we've got approval of our business case. At this point is now where we're considering we've got a project. For all intents and purposes of how people think of projects. And at this point is where we then start the project management framework, we enter the capital portfolio, what else do? We hand over from a proponent to a project manager now. So, from a decision-making side, and I know there's a whole lot more detail behind this as well, but focusing on the decision-making. So we move into the select phase. Probably something I should have mentioned. when we're in the assess and we're doing a business case, obviously we're looking at options and we're looking really wide at options. What we're saying the key difference from assess to select, because both still have options, assess, your options are typically going to be very substantially different. So if I've got a problem where I need more water capacity, my options might be build a new water reservoir, build a new treatment plant, run a big pipeline from somewhere. So we're in a substantially different space, those options. Mm-hmm. And obviously we do a business case of what's our cost benefit on them, we land on we want to build a new reservoir. So when we then go into select, the options then in this, and select is all about that concept development. Mm-hmm. So the options then are, well, what type of reservoir am I going to build? Am I going to do a concrete one? Am I going to do?
Should that still not be in the option study at phase 2?
No.
Because then by the time it becomes a project, the project's actually clear and it can be acted on. So rather than still have options after you've already assigned a project manager. What's he actually managing? He's still managing options. He's not actually managing a project. So yes. Should that not be part of gate 2, option selected, gate 3 start?
No, so where we landed is at this point the options aren't substantially different. You're never going, concept design always will have options.
Yes.
You're never going to have concept that has a single option.
Yeah.
The point here is in concept, the options are, there's a very clear scope on what it is. We've got to build a reservoir on this site. And the options then become about more the how and the detail of it. So you do have a clear option with boundaries, but you're developing that concept of what it really looks like.
We have a clear project, and
correct.
From there you still have options.
Yeah. And they're more your engineering options as opposed to substantially different. So very much if we were still considering in the concept, when we're developing the concept, considering if we're going to build a treatment plant or a reservoir, then we're too far. We should never have gone past gate 2. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, cool. So select phase, the project manager, so obviously there's a whole lot of phase work that goes on here and it's driven by the project management framework, it's driven by design activities that the design lead's doing, and that all gets captured when we say phase work. So once we have done that work, or throughout that work, there might be change requests that come in through that time because we uncover a whole range of different issues that then might change the life of project cost, or it might change the scope, or that stuff needs to go back through to get looked at, and particularly looked at in the sense of, does this actually impact the validity of this investment? Does the cost benefit now mean that this isn't the right option? So that's what the change process triggers, that project change request. So then we get to the point that we're, and the sponsor's deciding them, we then get to the end of the phase, we think we've got our concept pretty good. The project manager completes part A of the gate 3 checklist. So from gate 3 onwards, these checklists are a dual purpose, and we did this as an opportunity to not just have multiple of documents and forms. So part A of the gate 3 checklist is about the project manager making sure they've done what they've needed to do and get consistency between projects as well. So, making sure there's project management plans and different elements. Then part B is where the sponsor would review and make the decision for the gate. And there's a series of questions in there to help facilitate what constitutes, yes, this is still valid and it still should proceed. Okay, so gate 4 or define phase. So we've got our concept, we've gone into define, and we're about doing the detail, might be a detailed design. It's also about doing our execution planning under the project management framework. Again, exactly the same as what I just talked about in terms of that process and key documents. So you'll have change requests during the phase that the sponsor will assess. And then you'll have a gate 4 checklist that the project manager fills out part A and the sponsor fills part B. So we have our detailed design approved, we then go into execute, again, exactly the same. Change requests during the phase as we start to dig the dirt, when we find something there we didn't expect might trigger a change. Probably the thing to note is typically at gate 4, this is going to be your final investment decision. And typically, if we talk 80-20, this is the last point you've got to say, no, I'm not going to proceed with this project. There are other outs and things, like when we get the contract back, we might procure for execution and go, holy dooly, this is $10 million, not $2 million. And that might be a point still, I guess we can reconsider. But in terms of decision gates and the formal decision gates, this is what we consider a final investment decision.
And this is where final funds approval comes through as well?
I'll talk budget in a second.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes and no.
Yeah, okay.
So the other aspect of it is that we do design and construct projects in this business, and that is after we've got the concept design, we go out for a D&C. Typically in that case, our final investment decision is going to be back at gate 3, not gate 4. So there is that element, it does shift. So we go to execute, we have change requests, the sponsor approves, and then we have a gate 5 checklist. So again, project manager fills part A and the sponsor completes part B. And so again, there's a series of questions about it moving. Once we get to gate 5, the questions are really about, is this investment ready to operate and maintain? Have we got all the things we need to effectively commission or go live? Is it commissioned? Can we actually hand this over to our operators? So close, so we've now got our investment operating, so our water reservoirs online, it's servicing the network, and it's in use. The closing gate 6 is more, I guess, the, or what I call the paper side. But it's not all the paper. There is an amount of paper, particularly around that operate and maintain side, that you need to have at gate 5. But then there's things like capitalisations, lessons learned, benefits realisation, all those types of things that can happen after the investment's in place. And that's what's happening in this closed phase. So making sure all our systems are updated, and we've, registered everything in ESCM that we've had to, and that side of it. There is a really strong focus on lessons learned, and there's becoming a bigger and bigger focus on benefit realisation, but it is a big improvement area as a whole business, and not something we'll be strong and straight up, but we're certainly starting to talk about it, which is good. Okay, so, and I know this is a lot to take in, but that's the things I guess you can expect as a sponsor as we step through this. And I guess I'll talk to the mechanics of the gate, and this is something that it is going to be a 2-stage rollout and implementation, and this is where I say we're making progress, not perfection. So from July 1, what you will see is very much still a paper-based thing. So the forms and the checklists, whilst you can use electronic signatures or whatever on, there's still going to be forms and checklists that have to be emailed for a short period. We have a process and procedures set up of how to show how that actually, who emails where and at what point. So there will be that detail for you. But the key change, I guess, and this is where the progress is that those forms and checklists won't just sit as an attachment in the IPP. All the fields in them are going to be updated to actual fields that exist in IPP. So we can run reports and we can look at these projects and look at all the fields of data that we're filling in for them. Whereas if anyone's been a part of the bid process previously, we have all this rich information in Excel documents for each project, but you can only ever look at it on a case by like individual project. You can't actually drop out a report of multiple fields. So that's the progress. We've got a Tech One consultant on board. They actually start the 8th of June with us. And what they are working with us to achieve is that the form information, so the form, so when the investment opportunity brief and the business case, you'll actually directly enter that information into Tech One. You won't have to do a form and then a team's got to enter it, so we don't have to double handle it. So that's what they're setting up. They're also setting up for gate 0 to 2, and I have some hope, I'm not sure, Sarah might shoot me for this, but there is some hope that it will be for all gates, that the approval side of it and those checklists will actually be done via workflows in Tech One.
Yeah.
So we'll eliminate that paper base. So something to be really wary of is that we're in an interim system. The IPP is effectively just a register of data. It isn't the module in Tech One called Project Lifecycle Management, which is a lot more fancier in workflow. So we're not there. We're still in this interim and we're trying to use what we got really effectively and get efficiency. So we still, even from late August, we'll have to do manual updates of the IPP, and that will be, for the capital space, will be done by the asset governance team. So we're doing training with them, and that's around the change request. So during a phase, if we have a change come up, then it still will be a paper-based form, and asset governance will then update the system, update IPP once the sponsor has approved or not. For IRC meetings and the agenda, it is going to be facilitated by the asset governance team who own the IDF and are taking on managing it, particularly since I'm going on leave, but as the owner of IDF long term anyway, it was always intended it got handed over to them. So they will facilitate, and we're working, and I haven't got the exact details for you around this, we're working on the procedure at the moment of just the mechanics of how that will actually happen. How do we know which projects need a decision and that sort of stuff. So, and obviously we're working in this two-staged approach of when we're paper-based first workflows. Is there any questions so far? Sorry, please jump in, stop. If there is, put your hand up. No? Okay.
Sorry, it's Helen here. How you going?
Good.
I have a question just about determining when something actually doesn't fall within this process. So kind of like a way of determining when it's business as usual and doesn't require this process. Okay.
So in the corporate, so there's a couple of things, and I'm keen to hear if we need more too. There's a couple of things. We have in the corporate standard in attachment 1, it's a big matrix, I guess, that gives really good examples and description of each of the categories. So I guess that would be my go-to in the first instance, to have a look at whether the project I've got actually fits in with any of them.
Okay.
In the definitions, I guess, of what an investment is, it does describe as well what we're considering an investment, and it does give some exclusions as well.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I'll have it then.
But certainly, Helen, as we start to use it, if we're finding that that's not enough guidance, then by all means, let's send that in, and if we've got to update the corporate standard to add more examples or more exclusions or whatever, then let's do that.
Okay.
Okay, so
Comment?
yes.
Yeah, so this is more of a comment. I think from a framing perspective, the fact that we have gates, we need to be prepared and accept that what this means is that at any point, if the whole thing doesn't stack up, we can mop on it.
Correct.
It doesn't matter that you've gone past the final investment decision. I think that's pretty critical to. Obviously, we don't need a habit of, of doing that, past that gate, because it would probably means weapon and the work properly. But if we accept that potentially in most instances your 70% or more of your whole of life costs are in your open maintenance costs, then absolutely you should be able to.
Yeah. Absolutely, and this is where I guess why this meeting and training is so important, because these decisions, and Adagate quite rightly pointed out, there's 4 decisions typically that you can make. That is approved and proceed to the next phase, approved but not now, so hold till future, and that could be a number of reasons why we hold. Not approved, so pull the plug. This is not viable anymore. We do not need to do this. This can't happen. It's pull the plug. And the 4th option is always, I need more information to make the decision. So I've seen significant projects, particularly where we take it up to the boardroom, or it goes for a decision and they ask for more information. So that's where we go back, get a bit more, and we go back. I'd probably put Marley Brown in that as a perfect example, or the coal exporters, where we've sort of taken a couple of versions of business cases and not got approval and gone back to do more subsequent work. So yeah, absolutely. And when we're giving this power of sponsor, it comes with that ability and that right and that delegation to say, no, this does not stack up and we need to stop, or we need to do something. We just don't let it keep going. Because what inevitably happens is we end up with something at the end that is really expensive to operate and maintain, where if we hadn't known that up front, we may not have even said yes to the business case. Yes, thank you, Thomas.
That's right. Some cost fallacy can be very easy to fall into.
Yes, yeah. So investment opportunity committee, quickly, it's a peer review type function. It's compulsory for significant, optional for the other 3, but is still a really good, valuable team to put an assessment over it and to give support to the sponsors. Anyone can ask, you as a sponsor can request the IOC be a part of it. And they're only for gate 1, 2 and 6. And we've had all the members, the current members of the IOC, say that they want to continue. So that's the members that will continue on that IOC for the next 2 years. Okay, we've got half an hour left, and pretty much I've got a few examples to work through and then a couple other closing key points, and I haven't forgot the budget question, so we'll do that, Brian. Now, I just want to step through this. So this first, and I've got 4 examples. The first one we'll spend the most time on, and then we'll skip through the others pretty quickly. So this is the Boyne Aquatic Recreation Centre. So this is one that was used as a pilot project in the first phase of the last 12-18 months, and has somewhat aligned to the IDF as they've been running it through. So the first half is actually what happened, and the second half is an example of what could happen. So in the established phase, there was an idea that come from the boardroom, and not that they did an investment opportunity brief, but they did something similar, and that come through as a council resolution that this isn't an idea that we want to spend time and effort on looking at. So Gate 0 effectively was a resolution by council. We then went and did a problem and opportunity, and sorry, what I should say is at Gate 0, they said, look into this and bring back to us a business case about doing a pool in Boyne. So what then happened is we went off, did our problem or opportunity statement, and at this point we haven't yet got a completed business case, so it went to Gate 1 for a decision by the sponsor. The IOC, I don't believe was involved in this one, but if they were running as they should, then they would have been in this Gate 1 review before it went to the sponsor. So the sponsor said, yep, you've defined the problem or the opportunity, let's complete the business case. So we then went on and did a business case. We did get external support to help us in both steps. We did community consultation. There was huge stakeholder engagement as well through this. And then we went to Gate 2. So Gate 2, it would have the IOC review because it's a significant project, but obviously in this case, they weren't quite set up yet, and it went back to council for the decision of the gate because they had resolved at Gate 0 that they wanted to see the business case. So Gate 2, we went back to council. Council resolved to support the business case and that we were to move on to concept design, and that's where we're currently in now. We've got concept designs happening. They resolved at Gate 2 to bring back concept designs to them. So if we then look ahead at what may happen, and I'm not saying by any means that this will, so Gate 3 will take those concept designs back to council and they'll make a resolution. And let's say they say, yep, go ahead with this pool. We'll then go and do some detailed design and execution planning and all that realm. We'll then go back to council for a resolution, let's say, they've asked for it to come back, and we'll make a final investment decision around whether we're going to build this pool. So they say yes, and let's not repeat this outside of here. They say, yep, we're going to build the pool, and we go and construct this pool, and we implement it. We start the MMF, so we start looking at how we're going to operate and maintain this pool. And we have that all figured out by the time we go to Gate 5. At this point, council hasn't asked for it to come back, so it's just a decision by the sponsor, and we might do an update to council. Hey, council, they cut the ribbon, they do all the fancy things. We've got a pool. And Thomas is laughing at me in here if you can't see me. Then we go to closed phase, so we're doing our lessons learned, we're capitalising, we're making sure all our systems updated, and we're doing our benefits realisation, and we go to Gate 6. Gate 6, the IOC is involved, and the decision in this example is made by the sponsor, and we might do an update to council as well. And then we move into business as usual. Does that make sense? And is there a comment, Thomas?
Yeah, if I can just help.
Yeah.
So in terms of this particular example, and there could be some arguments about it, but this is one of those projects where from a delivery mechanism, DMC is probably the more appropriate option. So current thinking is that's how we'll do it. Obviously subject to change, but
yeah. So and that then, and look, this is only
of course I understand. Yeah,
but part of the select phase, and this is detailed in the corporate standard. Sorry, Erickson, I'll get to you in a second. Part of the corporate standard really details that where we or our delivery approach is something that we really have to make a concerted effort to consider, and that's considered right back from that select phase. So that's part of project management. Did you have a question, Erickson?
Thanks, Lisa. I just wanted to make a statement in relation to this phase. Yes, it is council that makes the decision on the final investment decision, but part of considering that is that significant projects generally are significant projects put up for investment opportunities from a Australian or state or other form of funding. So whilst the final investment decision is made, the project may sit there until the capital is realised.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So building into IPP the ability to say we've got gate 4 approval, however it's on hold subject to XYZ. So yeah, very good point, Erickson. Any other questions or comments on that?
This might be a bit stupid because I'm a bit of a fluffy person, but I actually love the visual, and I wonder whether that accompanies each project and almost gets registered in ECM. So if things keep coming up, we can actually see where this project, like what gate it ended at, or where.
So you put a schedule against any, or a timeline against any project, I guess.
Yeah.
With that you'd have milestones. And then you'd baseline that as well.
Well, I almost think that if...
Well, you're just talking as a visual.
Yes,
so
if
someone
it's got
to
said
see
no to, and then in 5 years' time a new council says, we want to look at a Boyington pool, we could actually refer back to this and say, well, this is the gate that stopped at, this was why.
Yeah, so it will all get captured in IPP. So even if something gets said no to, so say we end up at gate 4 and we go, no, we're just not building this, and it's a no, that will get recorded in IPP, in Tech 1,
Okay.
and it'll be not approved. It won't get deleted, it'll just sit there.
Yeah.
So I guess where
Yeah.
part of it also is where we have these new big ideas, is doing a search to see if there's been any other big ideas similar to this in the past and what's the history of it. And this is the importance of our registering documents in ECM and capturing that history, capturing it in Tech 1, capturing it in the appropriate places. So that where we have these ideas, we don't continue to spend money to do the same things just because we've got a new set of people in this business.
Cool.
You're a bit fluffy, aren't you?
Righto, so I'm conscious that we have 20 minutes left and there's a few other really important things. So I'm just going to touch on what's different in these examples. So this is an advanced investment, and the difference in this one is that where it come from. So as an example, this Hetherington water reservoir, this is one we built, it's in Gladstone. It was identified from an asset growth plan that we needed more capacity for water, so we built this reservoir. And also an asset failure as well. So this one, I guess, comes through from SAP as the asset manager. Being advanced, the line manager is 0 instead of council like the previous. And then the sponsor was the decision maker at all the gates subsequent. There was no requirement to take it to council from an investment decision perspective. So we went through all the same steps. I think this one actually I got a bit wrong. We actually did a D&C on this contract, so the final investment was 3, but that's horses for courses. So the decision is by the sponsor. As per the delegation, if that sponsor is a level 3 manager, then the GM would need to come in and make this decision at final investment decision. And then we continue through. So this is an example of the project that we have built and is operational. Okay, so a standard investment. Again, exactly the same. We've got a timber bridge replacement here. This is one we're executing at the moment in the current financial year. So again, the asset manager it's a renewal program, so it come up, flag this one. The line manager, so it probably would have come out of Niels's team. Niels said, yep, let's go. It's a standard investment, so it didn't need a formal gate one decision. However, it's really important to say that even though you don't need that formal gate one, it's still expected you do all the work from the phases. So you still have to do your problem statement, and obviously a timber bridge replacement is quite straightforward, and it's not intended to have an essay, but we've still got to document it. So again, same as the previous one, the sponsor's making the decision. I have made a mistake here and I'm going to go and change this. For standard, the delegations doesn't require a GM at that final decision. It was only the other, so I've got that wrong on this slide. And then the same decision makes, the sponsor makes the decision. So again, this is the standard stuff. We do it all the time. The rigor doesn't need to be as much. It's our 70%. Okay, then we have an urgent investment. So this is one, we've got an AO1 series rising main. We had a failure of that. We've currently got it, it's in execute phase at the moment when we've got it sitting on the bridge abutment at the minute. So it was risk assessed. We need to do something immediately. We need to get this sorted. So the intent is that we still have to establish this investment. But the difference is, so you would still do the gate zero activities, but you're going to do it in parallel with this select phase. So we're going to allow the engineering teams to start doing any design or anything they need to do or their investigations, but we're going to do it in parallel with getting our sponsors and our project numbers and our everything set up. Again, the sponsor is making the decisions and we step through exactly the same way. So I think I guess we're trying to find the balance between having appropriate rigour but not slowing these projects down. That's not an intent, and there's certainly a concerted practical sense that we're trying to apply to this. Any questions on examples before I just jump on? There's two other key things I'd like to discuss before we finish up. Okay, stakeholder engagement. This is an area that every single bit of stakeholder engagement I did in this project, this came up as when you looked at root causes of people's pain points, this was fundamental to a lot of them. So what people said and the stories I heard effectively come back to that we're not getting the right people involved early enough, and certainly that's a core principle in the IDF policy is about stakeholder engagement. You know, we could use terms like we need to front load these projects in that problem and business case, you know, as identifying as select phases, so we actually get a fit for purpose product at the end. So how we're addressing it, I guess when we first started, we said, oh yeah, you got to do stakeholder engagement, and as we went on, we grew the importance of it. Where we've now landed is that we've got a template for a stakeholder engagement plan, and it's mandatory to fill out. It is something that has to be presented to Gate 1, and it continues to get updated every phase, and it gets presented at each of the gates. Now, I know that word mandatory sounds scary sometimes, but these things don't need to be complicated if it's a simple project. However, even simple projects, you might have at least one, or I will guarantee you will have at least one stakeholder, and that's your end user. And if that's all that's on you, that's cool. Engage with them in your suite, you run through this. So the tool we've got gives a bit of guidance on how you might engage with them, and we've certainly got examples of these that you can call on. But if we're going to make an impact, and I've said this a lot through the engagement, if there's one single thing we do well and we have discipline about when we implement IDF, if we do this stakeholder engagement right, I think we'll be leaps and bounds ahead of some of those really core pain points and stories I heard along the way. So Please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you're all doing a crap job now, that is not what I'm saying. It's an area we've got a big improvement we can make, and I think a lot of people will definitely jump on board. I'll get off my high horse now, that's my slide. I get quite passionate about that bit. Okay, approvals. Brian, here's my chance. This is a big culture change in this business, and it's around the fact that we're introducing what I'm phrasing investment approvals. So the IDF is bringing in these gate decisions about investment. Are they valid? Are they this? Do we progress? So that's what I've phrased investment approval. We obviously also have budget approvals. In the past, in lieu of having IDF, we utilise the budget approval process every year to make our investment decisions. And so we've been operating like that for a while. And it hasn't been serving us well, I don't think. And it's an area that we have certainly made huge improvements so far with this latest budget build, and IDF to me is going to add another level for us. So they are different things and they happen at different times and we deal with them differently. And this is, for me, in terms of implementation, that culture change that we're trying to make as well. So, and then we have contract approval. So when we actually want to go and get someone, purchase something, buy something, and we obviously have a whole suite of delegations that surround that contract approval that Christy Wapner leads. So when I think about this fundamentally, is that you need a gate decision or an investment decision and a budget approval in the sense of adopting a budget for a project. Could happen in either order. So remembering that a capital portfolio is giving a forecast of the project. So it's saying, we think we're going to need this amount of money in these years. At a single snapshot in time, we adopt a budget based on that forecast. We say, we think for this project, we're going to need $1 million because we think it's going to be in these phases at this time. What the investment approval is doing is then saying, as we get to the phase, are we actually, is this a valid investment? Should we proceed on and therefore obviously spend that money if it's available? What is the new thing is that the investment approval, so the gate decision, say I'm going into concept design. I've got my water reservoir and we're going into concept design. I might get my gate approval today, so we're in 2021 financial year, but I've got no budget currently because my forecast said it wasn't going to be until 21-22. So all the budget sits over in 21-22, which is okay because our capital portfolio is now managing that reallocation of capital budget if we want to pull things forward or back. So at that point, I guess we've got our investment approval. Yes, it's something we want to proceed with design. However, it's then a question of is there budget available and are we going to reallocate it from a different project? If we have savings, we could bring it forward. So there's a lot of questions then about managing budget that then come into either within the financial year or then obviously we have an annual budgeting process. So that's why I said yes and no before. There is a yes, it unlocks it in the sense you've got approval to proceed to the next phase, but then there's a second element of, well, is the budget actually allocated? And that's where the capital portfolio comes into its element of managing that and that schedule and planning. And contract approval, I guess, you can't go and buy something or put a contract on a phase work if you don't yet have your budget or your investment approval. So it's kind of just that, it's the third wheel. I shouldn't say that to Christy, she might get offended.
Yes.
Yeah. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I did a great job of explaining that.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
I think this is something that we need some schematics to.
Okay.
Some schematics and some examples to actually illustrate.
I can do that.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, particularly, even using a few past examples, some real projects we're working through. Because that's going to be really important for everybody to be really clear on what is it we're talking about and how will it actually work.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll get that and send it out. I'll try and have it for the next training on Monday.
Yeah, particularly when we're dealing with the rest of the team,
and
it'd be good to have that.
Yeah.
Pretty straight.
The pictures. Good suggestion. Any other questions or comments? No. Okay, so the last thing I have is really around future actions, and again, progress over perfection. So we have identified a number of things and risks to implementing IDF and how we've structured it. That we've already identified and have processes to monitor that. So they're things around how the delegations are working, particularly. We're setting up on the connected page a way for people to submit a form to tell us where they're having issues or improvement ideas and that sort of stuff. So that will all be set on connected and not asset governance. The governance team led by Brooke will be monitoring that. And we'll use IDF champions to help us to outwork those issues. The corporate standard has a review period of 12 months on it, so we've committed to review that in the next 12 months, and that will also help us with bringing on operational investments if there's any tweaks we need to do to make sure they can follow the IDF as well. Bringing online the operational investments, that's being led, I believe, by Sarah Hunter, but in their strategy and transformation business unit particularly. The last two are probably the more technical ones. So we've got to do an IPP data cleanse, and we've been talking about this for a long time, and every year we do a snippet of it. We're out working at the moment what that actually means when I say that. So that's all the legacy projects that sit in IPP. And the importance of that is at the moment, we haven't got the confidence on that 10-year. So when I talked about that 10-year capital plan, we don't have confidence of what currently sits in that. And so obviously then we can't use that to sell to councillors or anyone else. So that IPP data cleanse is all about getting confidence in that 10-year plan. And obviously there's elements of now we're introducing this IDF, there's more information we're requiring, so there'll be empty data fields against all of them as well. The thing to note, I guess, is there is some data fields that will be filled out for all IPP projects that currently exist, and that will be done by 30th of June. And they're the real core stuff that we need, so like the status of the project and sponsors and that sort of stuff. The last one is prioritisation models. So this is a guiding principle in the IDF policy that I don't think we've yet nailed, and I'm being really upfront about this. Is that when to do a gate decision, it's not only about if the investment is valid. The second question that you touched on, Kim, is about, well, can we actually do it now? Is now the right time? So it's not only about the right project, it's the right time. And prioritisation model is, I guess, what we utilise to enable that when we look at that 10-year plan. We have a prioritisation model and it's documented, and it's one we've been using for a couple of years. There are gaps in it. We see the gaps. We've seen the gaps this year when we did the budget this year, and it needs improvement. So I guess what I'm flagging is that it's a piece of work in itself. So if you're expecting IDF to give you a new way to prioritise these projects, what we're rolling out is not perfection by any means. It's an improvement space. However, we have a starting point, which is good. So yeah, so that's a future action. That's it. Any questions? Any improvements? There is another one of these sessions.
No, you've done really well.
That's good.
Please go to the connected sites. Apologies, you didn't get to see the fancy videos that we put so much hard effort in.
I watched them yesterday.
Yeah.
Did you? Excellent. If you see Chris, comment on his hair. He is quite appreciative of that. Poor Chris. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Grain team. Righto, thank you very much. This is recorded. We'll use it as training materials if you need to look back on anything. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.